Tonight, Vojta is going to talk to us about dependency injection. You see it on the slides. I think we all kind of go through this evolution in our coding style. You know, when we're starting out as developers, we do things in the most obvious way possible, and our code just kind of spills out of our heads and our hands the way it comes. But then, you know, after we've had to change that code a couple times, we realize maybe there's a better way to organize that code, and so we end up going through a couple of iterations about adding layers of abstraction that are not immediately obvious. But there's become a sort of a standard for how we organize code to make it actually very easy to change code, very easy to test code, and just make it easy to read the code and maintain it yourself. And this is what Vojta is going to talk to us about today. Both how does dependency injection work in general in any language, but then specifically in Angular, what happens. So Vojta, come on up.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, guys, for coming. Yeah, my name is Vojta, and I work with these crazy guys on AngularJS. And I'm gonna tell you something about dependency injection, which is actually really important part of Angular. Well, let me explain what is dependency injection. What is dependency injection?
Dependency injection. Dependency injection in object-oriented computer programming is a design pattern with a core principle of separating behavior from dependency resolution.
Yeah.
Your phone did that.
That simple it is. So, thanks for watching. Okay. So, first thing, why should you care about dependency injection? Or, yeah. Well, I think dependency injection will make your code way better. It will make your code easier to maintain. So as a result of that, it will make you guys more productive. And that's something I believe you should definitely be interested in that, and you should definitely care about. And the next question is how? Well, it will help you with all the wiring, so you don't have to write that code. And you know, less code, that doesn't mean just less typing, but that's also less reading, less refactoring, less opportunities for bugs, less code to test, etc. So less code is definitely one of the things. Another thing how it helps you is it make your code more extensible, more easy to maintain, more flexible. And again, I will show you later what I mean with that. And last, my favorite, it's way easier to test. Dependency injection will help you a lot with testing. And again, we'll get to there. So my goal in this talk is to prove these kind of statements and show you that they are right. Right? So, let's go into the code. I'm gonna use this app that probably most of you are already familiar. It is well-known to-do app. You know, you can add new tasks, you can mark them as done, you can archive them. That's pretty much it. Let me show the code. Again, we have some template, HTML, and we have controller that contains all the logic. And of course, we have unit tests as well. So here's our unit test for the controller, right? But the thing is, if you change something, it's just everything happens on the client. So if I refresh the page, you will get, again, the same two items that I had at the beginning, because there is no storage, nothing like that. So that's what we are going to do now. We are going to implement, we're going to store all these items in MongoLab so that it's persistent. So if you look into this line, MongoLab is a awesome storage in cloud, and they basically provide you Mongo storage with nice RESTful API. So I already created an account for that, and we're going to use that. Okay, so these two lines, you can see there are hard-coded 2 items. So that's what we want to change, and we want to load these items dynamically from the server. And to make it nice, let's say we want to abstract this whole logic, this talking to server. We want to abstract that into some other object, into a standalone object. In Angular, we call it service. So let's call it service. It's going to be, let's say, item resource service. And this service will be responsible for sending all the requests to Mongo app, parsing the responses, setting proper headers, and all that stuff. Okay, so this code might be something like item query, say. And that will basically load the data from the server, right? And here's the problem. Here's my first problem. How do I get this item, right? Because this controller obviously needs this service. So first thing that you can do, and that's kind of the first thing that people were doing, is doing something like this. New item resource. We just instantiate it. And probably this service needs to parse the response from server, so I guess it needs some JSON parser as well, and I guess some low-level facility for just sending the XHRs, right? So I think you're pretty much done. This should work, right? And here's my first question. What do you think about this, guys? Can you see any issue? Is there anything you don't like about this code? I mean, it's just one line. Sorry, say again? Yeah, they are just global defined somewhere. Probably on your window object. Okay, so first problem that I can see in this one line is that this controller needs to know a lot of things. Right, this controller needs to know where to find the service, because it needs to know that the item resource is the constructor to call, and even worse, it needs to know how to construct it. So it needs to know all its dependencies and all the tricky things to instantiate this guy. And that's kind of breaking the whole idea, like the whole point why we are abstracting these things, this whole logic into a standalone service, was to get nice separation of concerns so that the code is nice and readable and easy to understand. And now we are putting this responsibility to this controller, which kind of breaks what we wanted to do, right? So that's, for me, number one issue. What else? Any other ideas? It's difficult to maintain. Like, think about, let's say you want to change JSON parser to XML parser. Now you have to go through all the controllers that are using this service, and you need to change this to XML parser, right? So it's kind of tricky to maintain this. Another thing that I don't like is hidden dependencies. So if you look into this controller, you look into the constructor and you can see, hey, it just requires scope. So if I want to instantiate this controller, I just need scope and I'm good, right? But then you do it, and in the background it creates item resource and it fires XHR request to server and maybe some other stuff as well. So this constructor is actually lying to you, because it's kind of, these dependencies are hidden basically. They are not explicit. What else? How about testing? How would you test this? How would you test this controller? Any ideas?
What's testing?
Good question. It was. So there was. This question was, what is testing? So that's a really good question.
You can ask your phone.
Yeah, I might ask my phone. Well, let's do it afterwards. I mean, testing is a pretty cool thing, and I I really hope to show you in this talk that testing is really cool. So that's kind of my goal. So okay, so any ideas how to test that? That was an opinion that you can't. And it's really close to true. Like, it is JavaScript, so you can do pretty much anything. Like, honestly, it is possible to test that, but it's really difficult. So definitely, I will show you how dependency injection will help you with testing, but for this moment, it is definitely a problem. It is definitely an issue. It's almost impossible to test. So once you have this code, it's more likely you won't do testing because it would be too difficult. So let's make it better. Let's do something that is called factory. So we create an object called factory, and it will have method get item resource, which will return new instance of item resource, and pass get parser and get xhr, something like that. Then we need get parser method, and we need to get xhr method. Oops, I forgot new. And now we change this line to be factory get item resource. It looks like a lot of code. I mean, it is a lot of code. But actually, it turns out this is way better, because this solves many of these issues that we just discussed. So first thing, we just separated the behavior, which is in our controller, from dependency resolution. That's really good, because now it's going to be easier to maintain. I mean, now if you want to change the JSON parser to XML, there's just one place, and it's inside this factory. That's just one place you have to change, right? So it is easier to maintain, although you have to write way more code. The good thing is that the controller doesn't have to know how to instantiate the item resource anymore. The bad thing is it still needs to know where to find it. It needs to know, hey, I need to find this factory and ask for that. But at least it needs to know only about its direct dependencies, not how to instantiate them and how to get, its transitive. So that's good. What else? How about testing? How about testing this code? What do you think, guys? Yep. Which is basically, I'm sorry, the answer was monkey patching the factory, and that's a good answer. So it is possible to test that, although it's really tricky, because then you have to worry about cleaning up all the state after every test, And basically, monkey patching this factory, you could do the same even with the previous example. Because the resource item was just constructor defined on window, so you could monkey patch window. I mean, it's super ugly, but you could do that. So testing is still really difficult with that. And we still have these hidden dependencies, right? And I guess you can see there's a lot of code. I mean, this is a trivial example, and it still is like 10 lines of code. So if your app gets bigger, it's going to be huge. Okay, let's refactor that. Let's use dependency injection. That's, if you know this Hollywood principle, like don't call us, we will call you. That's dependency injection. So this is my favorite refactoring, right? Watch that, guys. You take these lines, you remove them, then you take this line, you remove it, and you explicitly specify your dependencies in constructor. And you're done. So this is refactoring to use dependency injection. And it turns out that this solves all the issues that we just discussed. Right? What? So I'm repeating, you still need to write the factory though. Yes, but this factory is different. because you don't worry about wiring the code together. You don't worry about resolving the dependencies. That's something that dependency injection does for you. So the factory is actually, it can be just the constructor itself, right? In our case, the only factory would be just registering, hey, here's the constructor that I want to use, right? But you wouldn't write new item resource and passing dependencies. You don't do that. This whole code is gone. And we will get to the point how to do this, like registering to injector. But yeah, so we kind of solved all these issues because we don't have hidden dependencies now. If you look into the constructor, you can see what are the dependencies. You can see it requires scope and it requires item, and that's all. You know, we still have this strict separation of dependency resolution and behavior, and it is easy to test because you just inject different versions of these dependencies during testing, and we will get to that. So just to show you that it really works, I mean, if it works, I'm not sure with that, but yeah. So now if I refresh, I'm getting one item from the Mongol app already. You can see the request, so it works. Okay. Do you have any questions to that? I mean, this was kind of like attempt to describe the problems the dependency injection is trying to solve and how it is going. So, do you have any questions to that? Does it make any sense?
Yes.
Thanks, Igor.
But wait, can we answer our gentleman's question? How does this actually work in Angular?
Well, if you really want to know that, I can do that. Okay, so let's go a little bit more into Angular world. Let's see how all these things works in Angular. I mean, these ideas were pretty much general, so you can apply them in any language, pretty much. Like some people think that you don't need dependency injection in dynamic languages like Python or JavaScript. I really disagree with that, and I hope to show you that using dependency injection is really, you get a lot of benefits even in dynamic language. Yes?
So you get a lot of dependencies inside of the function. So the constructor will be bigger and bigger in terms of or how we structure.
Okay, so I will try to repeat the question. If there are many dependencies, the constructor gets bigger and bigger. Yes. That was the answer. And I use this kind of like tactic where you have too many dependencies. It's probably a good time to refactor. It's probably a good time to extract that service into multiple service and maybe you have some. Yes. Or multiple objects. Because whenever your unit has too many dependencies, it probably means that it does too much. Okay. So let's go back to Angular world. We kind of saw how to ask for things, and it is really easy. You just specify this as an argument, and you will get it. Right? That is awesome about dependency injection. It's declarative. You just specify it as an argument, and you will get it. And because the whole Angular is wired together by dependency injection, and whenever Angular needs to instantiate anything like directive, controller, or filter, service, whatever, it always asks injector to do that. So you always have this luxury of just asking for stuff, and you will get it. The question is, how does the injector know what to inject? Like, how does the injector knows how to construct these things? And the answer to that is through modules. Angular module is basically a way to configure the injector. right? Angular module is just a set of definitions. It's a set of definitions how to construct controller, how to construct service, how to construct filter, and stuff like that. So if we look into our code, you can see this line where we are creating a module that is called to-do, and then we are saying, hey, this module has controller app, and this is definition. This is basically constructor, how to construct this controller. And here down we have this. We have the item service, that's the service that is doing all the communication with MongoLab, right? So we are just putting it into this module. So later on, when this controller is being instantiated, it asks for item, and it will get this item, right? So you can see it match the argument name needs to match this guy. So this doesn't, the order of these arguments doesn't really matter. Like you can change this, and injector will still, do it right. So it still works, right? The order doesn't really matter. Why? Because it is resolved based on the argument names. So because you call this item, and then you provide a service that is called item. So that's how injector knows how to resolve these dependencies based on these names. And then when Angular application is being started, we call that bootstrap. Well, let me actually show you ng app. So on body or somewhere where you want to put your application, there's ng app, which basically tells, hey, this is Angular app. And you specify which modules you want to load. So in our case, we are saying ng app equals to-do, and that means that Angular, the bootstrap of Angular, will create new injector, and it will configure this injector with this module. So it will actually say like, hey, injector, here is to-do module, so please load this module. And that's how injector knows what to inject. When controller asks for the service, it already knows how to construct it. Okay. Does it make sense?
How can
No?
this work? Especially with unification.
It is magic. Yes. So the question was how this can work with minification. And the answer is it does not work with minification. But if you want to use minification, which is something that you definitely want, then you need to use slightly different syntax where you specify these arguments like this. Like that, and you say scope. And that will help injector to know what to inject, because when you minify this code, this will become A and this B or something, right? Okay, so
when would I not use the syntax?
the question is when you not use this syntax, and the answer is either when you are not minifying your code or during testing. Like inside your test, and I will show you that, you don't have to use this special syntax because you don't minify your test. And we are actually working on a plugin for Clojure compiler, so that if you are using Clojure compiler to minify your code, you will be able to use this short syntax even with minification, because it will do this for you, hopefully. I already started working on that, but then I started doing something else. Well, okay, so we know how to ask for stuff. It is easy because you just put it as an argument and you will get it. And we know how to tell injector what to inject, right? Through modules. So let's see some more interesting things that you can do with dependency injection. For instance, whenever there is an error, whenever an exception happens in Angular app, Angular always delegates this exception to service that is called exception handler, right? So you can easily change the behavior of this whole system. Like, let me show that. Let's say we have this add method, and we will throw an exception here. So if I go back to my app and I open console, okay, I need to refresh, and there you go. We throw an error. Nothing super interesting, right? But if you decide that you want a different behavior, you can define your own version of this exception handler. So you basically tell injector, hey, use this exception handler. It's going to be function, and let's alert this error, for instance. Let me show you the code for a second. Okay, and I go back to my app, I refresh the thing, and there you go. Instead of writing it into console, you get this error as alert. And I think this is really cool, because if you think about it, we've just changed the behavior of the whole system. Like, whenever any exception happens in your whole application, it will always be delegated to this guy. So you can really easily change the behavior of the whole system just by wiring it slightly together, just by wiring different version of the service, right? Question? Yes? Okay, so the question was, can you actually remove this exception handling so that it bubbles up and it ends up in your console? And the answer is yes. You can just throw it, like you can just rethrow the error. Sorry, I didn't understand that. Yes. So there's going to be one more item in the stack, right? But you will still see the original one, no?
Well, wait, no, because it'll get the straight stack and it's going to unround that one.
We can try it. I'm not sure. I don't know from top of my head, but I think this should not be a problem. Because you take the original error and you throw it again, so I think there's going to be just one item in the stack.
But in that case, web inspector will block on the first occurrence of the error. So the second one. Take this offline.
Yes, but web inspector will stop immediately, not when the error is handled. So anyway, okay, let's remove this error. And let me show you one more thing. Here's our item resource service that is talking to MongoDB, MongoLab, and it has API key, which is hard-coded. It's sort of authentication. So let's say I want to abstract that outside from this service so that I can use different API key in different environments. And see, it is really easy because you just ask for it in a constructor, and again, you just define it. You just tell injector that you want to use this guy. And now, the behavior is still the same, but now I can use different API, I can inject different API key for different environments. So for example, I have production, and I use some key on production, and then I have staging environment or end-to-end testing environment. I can use different API key. And I think this is really crucial because this allows you to refactor your app really easily. And that's something I really like, because I really like this sort of development where you kind of playing with things. Like whenever I start Angular application, I always just create one controller, and I put everything into this one controller and just kind of play with it. And then when I'm like, okay, here's so many things, so let's refactor that. And it's pretty easy. You just take the stuff out and you put it into a service and you inject this service. And if you decide later to change that, it is easy, right? So for instance, last 2 or 3 weeks, I've been working on TextDrive, text editor for Chrome OS. And it was a lot of fun. It was cool. But all these APIs, it was just, it was not released yet, so it was changing a lot. So basically, I did something one day, and the other day, it was completely broken. I had to change the whole thing. And so you design an architecture, this beautiful architecture, you design it one day, the other day, it doesn't work that way, so you need to change it. And another day, you need to change it again, and then suddenly, your architecture is not that beautiful because it doesn't fit the current state. It was great at the beginning. And I really think that the only way how to keep this nice and readable is just to keep refactoring. And with that, with dependency injection, it is easy to keep refactoring. You can easily rewire things and restructure. So it is great.
What's the difference between value and factory?
Igor. Repeat question. Yes. What is the difference between value and factory? So I guess this guy was asking about this method and this method. It's the same method for doing the same thing, almost. So both these methods, their purpose is to tell injector what you want to use, like tell injector how to instantiate something. In this case, we are telling injector how to instantiate API key, and in this case, we are telling injector how to instantiate item service, right? So the result is in both cases the same. But the value means that you are directly passing the instance. So in this case, the exception handler, this function is exactly the function that's going to be injected to all the places that requires exception handler, right? This exact function. But with factory, this function is actually called factory function. It gets injected, so it gets dependency that it needs, and then it constructs the instance, and it returns the instance. So the instance that will be injected to your controller is this guy, this instance, this object, right? But in case of value, this value will be injected, so the value is kind of inline, and you can't inject value. So to give you an example, let's change this exception handler. Let's take this exception handler and let's change it to factory. And this. See? So this, we might actually now ask for a $window and called $window alert, which is like maybe a bit nicer. But so this is the same as it was before with the value, but it's just a little bit complicated. I mean, in this case, value is perfectly fine because you don't need the injection, right? You could do the same with API key as well. There's a bunch of other methods like service and provider. If you're interested in that, you can look up that in documentation, or if you have questions, I can answer. But I think this might be sufficient. Okay. With regards to extensibility and flexibility of your system, I have one more thing, and that's the best thing that I want to show you. Do you know, guys, Batarang? I'm sorry, my English is horrible. So if the pronunciation is not right, sorry. But
Batarang, that's the boss of Batarang.
Batarang, okay. So anyway, who knows that? Oh, that was good tool as well, but this one is slightly better. Okay, I will show you. So we have this extension that Brian did that allows you to debug your application. right? So in my web inspector, I can click Angular, and I can see all the model. I can change these things actually, you know. And what is my favorite thing? You can benchmark all the bindings, right? So here you can see the time measurements, how fast or slow every binding is, right? That's super cool. That's really helpful. Is there Brian somewhere?
Yeah, here's Brian.
Ah, nice. So this awesome guy did this extension, and I think he could tell us how he did that, because I think dependency injection was really crucial to do that. It's all yours.
All right, thanks. All right, so hey, I'm Brian. If we haven't talked before, you should see me later. But here's one of the other cool things. So besides just replacing components with dependency injection, you can also use dependency injection to augment existing services or factories or things that you've defined. So Angular provides a method called decorator that you can use. So decorator gets, something that's already injectable, that you've already provided to the dependency injection system, and then it lets you change things, maybe add new methods, augment it, and then hands it back to the system to use. So what the AngularJS Batarang does is it injects a little bit of code into your app that asks for the root scope, actually, of your application, and then it changes how the watching functionality works. So it adds a timer before the watch, and then it stops it after the watch, and then it passes that right back into the system, and bam, it's all globally there. You get global performance metrics on your whole application, and so that's really cool. Conventional importing, all of those things, these hard paths, they wouldn't let you do that. You wouldn't be able to just say, let me just tweak this, this one service right here. So are there any questions on that? Anything else I should mention, guys? Back to you.
I don't know. You can enjoy it more.
How would you do it without? Oh, is there someone in Seattle?
Sorry if we were talking over people. We were wondering what the state of the plugin is.
The state of the plugin. Yes, you can get it. There's something on our blog describing that, and it's also in the Angular GitHub as well.
Check out blog AngularJS.
Yeah, check out blog.angularjs.org. It's definitely in there.
Do you have an example of how I would use a decorator?
How would you use a decorator? An example of that. Well, besides the Batarang, I don't personally have one. Have you guys done anything else?
Well, so for instance, we have a fake HTTP backend service, which is something that I will show you later. And this service is something that you can use to build your fake backend in the client, so that you can keep developing your app even without having the actual backend. And this fake backend does decorate the original HTTP backend, because for some requests, like for templates, you want to proxy the request to the actual original service to do the real request. I'm not sure if this makes sense, but
I forgot about that one. Do you inject it into the service or factory, or do you inject it with the decorator into another thing that relies on the service or factory?
I'm afraid I don't understand your question. Afterwards I can show you how to write decorator. That's easy.
I'd like an example of how to use a provider also.
Yeah, let's do that afterwards. So the question was asking, for example, how to use provider. I think we can do that afterwards, right?
It sounds very common, so let's just take that one.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Brian.
Yeah, no problem.
So the point of that is that, this extension is awesome. You will definitely like it, and it will help you a lot. But the point of this is that you can do these things as well, right? With dependency injection, you can rewire and you can change the whole system, how it works, So the same thing that Brian did, you can do that as well, and you can do it with your app. So you can do something that makes sense for your app. Maybe you are doing something crazy, something special, and you want some sort of debugging or benchmarking. So with dependency injection, no problem. All right, guys. Do you have any questions to that?
Sometimes, like, I want to do dependency injection, but I find that, like, I want to make a whole bunch of, like, injectable things, and it just gets kind of overwhelming. Like, writing all of those, like, you know, wrappers around everything. Is there an easy way to do that? Like, say you want to provide some, like, interface or something.
What was the question?
I don't know.
You can also use modules.
No.
So you can create.
So, hey, Brian, do you want to go to the mic? You want to go to the mic?
That's a good idea.
Repeat the question.
So the question is, what happens when you have lots of things that you're injecting? And Angular also provides modules, which I mean they work basically the same way, but you can develop a hierarchy then. So have you looked at that, or modules don't work? You can do that, right? I'm not making this up. Can you?
We do that in Angular UI, where we have a hierarchy and we call different chunks of different pieces we import.
All right, I'm done. Any other questions?
Let me. Yep, let's move on. We talked about testing a lot and how dependency injection helps you with testing. So I think it's a good time to show you that, right? So let's go back to our code. And first thing, a little bit of theory. I think when you want to do unit testing, you need testable code, right? And if you take it a step further, I would say you need to be able to instantiate all the units as standalone, right? And that's why I was talking about the hidden dependencies, because that's when this gets tricky. If you have hidden dependencies, it gets more tricky to instantiate these objects. Another thing you need for unit testing is to being able to mock out expensive dependencies. So for instance, in our case, when we test the controller, there is expensive dependency, which is the item, because it talks to a server. So you don't want to talk to a server during unit tests. So you want to inject some fake service that won't do that. Okay, let's give it a try. Here's back our controller. Here are my unit tests for that. And let me run these tests. Let's start testacular. Okay, there you go. So now, if I execute this unit test, you can see they are failing, and it's complaining unexpected request get something. And basically all my unit tests are now failing. Because if you go to the controller, you can see item query, and this guy is doing a XHR request, right? And we don't want to do that. So I would actually like to just unit test this logic of the controller without the communication to server, right? And it turns out that with dependency injection, this is easy to do, because we can just inject we can inject fake version of this item service that won't talk to server at all. So I can show you already. I create like simple mock of this service, which is basically just empty object with the same APIs. It has the same methods as the real one, but they are just empty functions. They are actually just mean spies, but whatever. And we are creating another module, which is mocks item, so that we can load this service during unit testing. So if I go back to my unit test, I think I might actually explain this module helper function. So you can see these unit tests are written in Jasmine. Are you familiar with Jasmine testing framework? Right? We really like Jasmine, but you can use any testing framework you like. But Angular is shipped with a couple of helpers to make testing with Jasmine even easier. So this module function is one of those. And module function, what it does, it loads given module. So calling before each module, that means before each spec, it will load this module into an injector. So in the background, there is, for every spec, it creates new fresh injector. So you don't have to worry about cleaning up all the stuff after the test is finished, because the next spec will get just fresh new injector with nothing. So this module helper will load a to-do module, which is our application. So we need to load this module in order to test it. And now to fix these unit tests, I'm going to load another module, and that's mocks item. Right? And now if I execute the tests, there you go, they are passing. Because what's happening now, if we go back to the controller, during these unit tests, this item is the fake one. But the controller has no idea about that. It is the same API, so it doesn't care. So this query method, it just returns empty array. And this guy over there, the item $safe, it does nothing. It's just empty function. Right? So I can focus on testing the logic in my controller, whether it's pushing the new item, whether it's clearing the text and stuff like that. And I don't have to worry about the server-side communication. Does it make sense?
Can you test with an actual Ajax call? Why is it throwing the exception? Is it a function of the tester itself, or why is it throwing that exception?
Okay, that's a really good question. So the question is, why is it throwing this exception, unexpected request? And yeah. So the answer is, there is already mock version of HTTP service loaded by Angular, so it doesn't do the actual request. It just throws this exception.
So, but can you test with an Ajax call?
You could, but for instance, the test run that we are using, or if you're using in browser and opening file, you would have to take care of responding the XHR. So I would definitely not unit test using real XHR requests, because then you have to worry about the server side. You need to prepare the server and stuff like that.
You absolutely don't want to use a regular XHR, because regular XHR is asynchronous, so it turns your test into asynchronous test, and those are possible to write, but they're more difficult to write. So not only you have to get the answer somehow to the client, back to the client, you also have to change your test from synchronous test into asynchronous test. So while possible, it's really, it complicates the test and makes it slow.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, it is more difficult to do asynchronous testing, but you can do that. Like if you're doing Node.js development, you're doing asynchronous testing all the time.
How do you handle a situation where you're happy with the promises? Like, does it require something you test, or would you inject a different promise?
Well, but with promises, it is asynchronous, but you have the power to resolve the promise, right? So you can do it actually inside your test. So for the code that is using the promise, it looks like it's asynchronous, and it is, but you are one level above, and you can actually resolve the promise. So you have the power to do that. So the test actually is not asynchronous. I guess the explanation is not that good, but.
I guess my question is, how would you mock a failure? I mean, basically, you're mocking a complete service failure, right? So I guess you could do that. Just pass
Yes.
all
Okay, so the question is, how can you mock failure of a service? And the answer, let's get back to that a little bit later. I will show it in detail. But basically, we have this mock for HTTP, and you can respond 404 or something. So you can actually test how does your application respond to failure. Yeah, question?
So you might have a test-driven development strategy where you write a test for a new feature that doesn't exist, it fails. You write the feature, and then your test passes. But in this case, your test fails until you have a mock of the service. So how would you describe the simple version of how you define what the service should do so you're testing it properly?
That's a great question. Ooh. So I will repeat it in my way, of course, like slightly different, and that's you're not testing the XHRs, and that's a good point, right? Can I change it like that? Yeah. So because in test-driven development, we should first test the XHRs, whether they are properly fired once we were implementing this whole MongoDB stuff. And yes, that's true. And I actually already wrote that test. I only didn't show you. So let me show you these tests. To do Mongo spec. There you go. So we have another couple of unit tests that are actually testing whether this integration with MongoDB, with MongoLab works. And now if I execute them, you can see seven tests. They are all passing. And let's look into these tests a little bit more. First, I wanna explain a little bit this inject function, which is another helper that we provide to make testing with Jasmine easier. And what this inject function does, it gives you this luxury of just asking for stuff, right? So in the same way as you're asking inside your controller or directive or whatever, you can do the same in your test. So in this case, we are asking for controller service, for root scope service, and for HTTP backend. And because of this inject helper function, it will pass this function to injector to get injected. So as a result, you don't have to worry about these things, how to instantiate. You don't instantiate these things. You don't look up these things. You just get them, right? And then there is this HTTP backend service, which is really interesting guy. You remember the previous case, we completely mock out the whole item resource service with some mock, with some fake version that does nothing. And now we want to test that this service actually sends the correct request. So instead, we are using mock HTTP backend mock, which is provided by Angular. And this HTTP backend mock is basically it's mock version of HTTP backend service, which is low-level service that is responsible for sending requests. And this mock version has the same API. So if you inject it into your application, the whole app works the same because it doesn't know this even. But this version doesn't send requests to server, right? It just pretends that. And even more, it has more APIs. It has APIs for testing. So for instance, here you can see there is function expect get. So you can actually expect requests, and you can train this service, this fake service, to respond, to pretend the server. So in this case, we are saying HTTP backend, expect get request to this URL, and then respond with a response. And the response is here. It's just a dump data from Mongo, right? So I'm actually testing whether my application works with these data that are the same data that I'm getting from Mongo. And if you look, let's look into the first test. Let's execute this guy. You can see we are testing whether 3 items are loaded, and we are testing whether the first item is AngularJS, which is, if you look into the dump, it's right here, right? And just last thing, to show you that it really works like that, I mean, I really like to say that you should never trust unit test without seeing it failed. So let's fail this one. Let's fail adding unit test. So we go to our controller and this guy, item $save, that's the guy that actually triggers the XHR request, right? So if I comment out this line and execute a test, yes, and execute a test, this one will fail. It says unsatisfied request post, blah, blah, blah. And the reason is that because we said, hey, expect post request to this URL with these data, right? And this request never happened, so the test is failing. And let me show you one more thing. We fix it like this, so now it's passing. And let's expect a different string. So let's expect like fake task 2. And now the test is going to fail again, but this time it will complain, hey, expected post to this URL with different data. Expected text fake task, but got text fake task 2, right? Okay, let's fix it. And I think I'm done. Do you have any questions? Nope. Does it make sense? Nope.
What did you want to mention that there is an end-to-end test runner for doing integration tests?
Sure. Yes, there is. Oh, okay. So for Seattle, Brad was asking whether we have end-to-end test scenario runner, or he was actually telling me to mention that. So yes, Angular for unit testing, we use Jasmine testing framework, or you can use whatever you want. And for end-to-end testing, we have actually our own test runner because why do we have our test runner? Because our test runner understands Angular, so it can do actually a lot of cool things. So if you can use for instance Selenium for end-to-end test your app, but then it contains a lot of like asynchronous stuff and waiting, like you navigate to URL and then you wait for resolving that, and that's kind of boring. But our scenario runner understands Angular application, so it gets notified, so you don't have to wait for these things. You get notification when to execute the next thing. So yeah, check it out.
How do you use dependency injection in these tests? Can you mock out the backend if you wanted to?
Yes. The question, I'm sorry. So the question was, how can you use dependency injection in this scenario runner? And the question is, the answer is yes. You can from within the scenario runner, you can get hold of the injector of the app, and you can actually assert some state of these services. To be honest, you can't change the application from scenario runner at this point, but that's something we should definitely do. We should allow you to do that. So you could actually load the different modules from within the scenario runner into your app. Yes, question.
Do you use browser to run your unit test? How do we?
Yes. I'm sorry. Repeat the question. It is so difficult to repeat the question all the time. I'm sorry. The question was, do you use real browser to execute unit tests, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. How do we do this from the Jenkins or other CI?
Okay, and the next question is, how do we do that from Jenkins or CI server? So first answer, yes, we use real browser. Here's the browser that I was executing in. I'm using a test runner called Testacular, which is something that we built for us to make our life more easier. And you can actually use that even with Jenkins. So let me show you. I can kill the Testacular is now, it was watching all my files, and whenever I change the file, you see whenever I saved the file, it immediately executes all the unit tests, right? That's what it does. But you can run it in like continuous integration mode or something. And let me, so I can pass single run, I believe. And now it will capture the Chrome, execute, and quit. So it just executed. It started Chrome, executed all the tests, killed Chrome, and reported the test and exit. So you can have a script on your CI server to call Testacular as a single run, and you can use multiple browsers as well.
So we use Linux system to run the CI, the Jenkins thing. So there's no Chrome and Firefox there. How do you run the admin? So you still use Chrome?
Yes, I use Chrome, but you can use any browser. You can use mobile phone or whatever is able to connect through HTTP.
So we need browser anyway. There's no browser in my Linux system.
Okay, the question is about headless testing. I believe you could capture Phantom.js as well with that, but I mean, if you want to use Phantom.js, I would just use Phantom.js without Testacular. It's one of the goals we want to do that with Testacular as well, to be able to just run the test just with Node.js environment without any browser, but currently it's not implemented.
Why would you want to test with real browsers?
Why would I want to test without real browsers?
Real browsers.
Why do you want to
Oh,
test
okay.
with browsers?
I'm getting tired. I'm sorry, guys. Aren't you tired? We should end. So the question was, why would you use real browsers? And my answer is, well, there are many differences in between browsers. And for instance, on Angular, we do a lot of DOM manipulations. Angular does a lot of DOM manipulations because it tries to do DOM manipulation for you. So we need to be sure that all these things work seamlessly across all the browsers. So we just need to execute stuff on real browsers. I mean, that's why we kind of can't use Phantom.js or Mocha or these things. Okay, next question.
What about code coverage? So you guys are writing a lot of test cases for your existing system. So the thing that you want is like metrics, how much has been covered and not.
So the question, is this question about Angular itself?
Yeah, generally, like you have a system like Testacular to start, write your test cases and run on top of Angular.
Okay, so the question is, what is our test coverage on Angular? How do you measure? Okay. Currently, it's difficult. Pull request welcomed.
So Testacular currently doesn't give you any information about test coverage. It's something that we want to do, but it's not high priority because we don't believe that test coverage is a good number or is very important. Test coverage can only tell you if you completely missed something. It cannot tell you what is the quality of your tests. What you care about is the assertion coverage, and that's something that is very hard to cover. If you do want to calculate test coverage today, there is another project called JS Test Driver, which is very similar in spirit to Testacular, but the implementation is very different. And that one can calculate this coverage. So if your goal is to know the test coverage, you can use that. There's like a test coverage plugin. But again, something we want to do, but which is just not high on our priority list because we don't think it's so important.
I'm going to finish it, right?
Do we have any questions from Seattle? Because you guys are kind of quiet and we don't want you. We want you to be part of the conversation. So, guys.
In here. Is that working okay?
Julie has mic, so if anybody has questions, now is your time.
This is Julie here.
Stay here.
I came late, but I just had a question about how large a code bases have you written with AngularJS, and And so what's your roadmap for the future?
Right. So the biggest application we have right now at Google is the DoubleClick digital. I forget the name because they just went through rebranding. But DoubleClick
Digital Marketing Manager, I believe.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah. DoubleClick digital.
Google has the best
something manager. Anyway, DoubleClick is the part of Google that makes a little bit of money for us, and they decided to. They decided that they needed to rewrite their entire platform, pretty much all the parts, and the part that interfaces with other agencies, the B2B app, went through a complete rewrite in the last year and a half or 2 years, and they picked Angular as their front-end technology. So that application is the biggest we have at Google right now that we can talk about, and it's a large application. I forget. It's
last time I checked that.
What?
Don't talk about that. Why?
We can't talk about numbers. Okay. So it's a large application. If you go through sales and get an account, you can check it out. It's a B2B app, so it's not something that just the public can get to. But it's a huge app. It's a huge app. Any other questions in Seattle? Yeah, so if you want to know more about what is being built with Angular, we have a website called builtwith.angularjs.org, where all the applications that are significant are listed there, and more are coming online every day. So, and we'll be adding all the Google applications as they launch in the near future there, and also blog about it. So with DoubleClick, we're also trying to get the team leads to come to a meetup in New York and possibly also here in Mountain View to talk about how they build their application. So if you want to know about this, keep in touch and keep an eye on the meetup announcements, and we'll definitely schedule a talk about this in the near future. Other questions in Seattle? You guys are very quiet. Come on, just ask something. Okay.
So can we think of Angular as a replacement for GWT within Google, or?
You can think that.
I can speak about that. So the DoubleClick team, I believe, had been considering GWT GWT as well, and the team that I'm on, which is a sort of part of DoubleClick, a slightly different application that interfaces with it, was originally being written in GWT until we learned that the larger part of the application was being written in Angular, and so we switched over. So we've definitely had developers who are working on both. A lot of people like Angular a lot more. GWT has a lot of traction, and migrating at any point is hard, so there's certainly teams using both.
Thanks, Julie. Other questions? How about here in the room? It's okay, Vojta.
It's too long.
Okay. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to just show you some small applications that we built recently. And we're just going to hang around. We can discuss things. Seattle, if you have questions, just talk to Julie. And also, we can talk through VC. I would like the second part of the meetup to be very open-ended and just discussing things and talking. So please do that. Thanks. What I would like to show you is a small application that we built recently with the Chrome team. The Chrome team, they are building on this application platform for Chrome and for Chrome OS. So their goal is to be able to create desktop-like applications that would run in the browser using HTML and JavaScript. And they are doing this through APIs that are available for Chrome extensions in this Chrome platform. And these APIs are really powerful, and they allow you to not only make the application look and feel like a desktop application, but they also provide you access to things that regular web application doesn't have access to. For example, the file system and many other things that you don't find available in web applications. So what we built and what actually Vojta built is a text editor that runs in Chrome. So the way it looks, you just go to Chrome, you click on it, and it opens a new window, which integrates with the file system, and now you can just browse your local file system. You can open a new page, a new file, or existing file, and you can edit it. We have syntax highlighting. We have, if you have JavaScript, there's linting going on. This is not something that we did. We're actually utilizing the ACE editor that comes from the Cloud9 project. What we did is we took the ACE editor and the ACE editor, and we wrapped it into Angular application. And Angular application provides this glue between the Chrome platform and the ACE editor. So everything that is necessary for talking to the file, all the stuff that is happening with talking to the file system, opening all these windows, is done through Angular services. The settings window and all this stuff that allows you to customize the application, and the key bindings are done through Angular and Angular services and Angular data binding, but the actual editor is done using this third-party component, ACE editor. So this was a very interesting project, and at first we thought like we couldn't really use Angular on this project because ACE editor is going to do most of the work. What is there going to be for Angular? But as we worked on this, we realized, oh, there's actually quite a lot that Angular can do. The dependency injection can help you structure the application in a way that is maintainable and testable. And the data binding can help you with many things like this settings window, settings box, and doing the interaction with the user. So to our surprise, there was quite a lot that Angular could do, and this code is open source. I'll post links, so if you're interested in seeing how this works and how it was implemented, you can definitely dig in the code. Vojta did a really good job of implementing all the tests and everything, so you can see how application with the Chrome platform and AngularJS can be built and tested. So that's one application. The other application that we released was the Angular Batarang. So that's the extension for Chrome that allows you to test Angular applications. Again, I'll post the link. We have a question?
Yeah. So the editor, it can only open text files, or it can open other formats as well?
It's a text editor, so it can open any text file. So it can be HTML, CSS, anything. The editor actually integrates with the Chrome OS, and if you're running it on Chrome OS, it will save the files so that they are saved in the Google Drive. So they're using it's using the cloud storage, and it's actually the Chrome OS doing most of the work for us. And that's why it's called Text Drive, because it's a text editor for Google Drive. So the other one was the Batarang. Also, everything's open source. So if you want to see how we decorated the services in the Angular application, something you can dig into and see how we do the decoration. And the last application I wanted to show, but I can't show you right now, is a W reader. Everything's using very unstable APIs, and I just got burned because the reader just doesn't start. So I'm using Nightly build from Chrome, so they just changed something and broke my demo. But again, the code is open source. I'll find what the problem is and fix it, and then if you check it out tomorrow or so, it's going to be working again. So these are just some applications that we built recently. We're working with other teams inside of Google, and I'm not sure if we're going to have any open source demos anytime soon, but if you are building any application that you would like to share or do a small presentation on, we will give you space here at the Meetup. You can definitely do that, and you can pitch your company and also show how Angular helped you build this application and which parts of Angular you found really good and where are things that we should improve on. That's about it. I said this is going to be a short demo, so it was really short. Thank you.